who likes Disney? Okay, so not everyone likes them. The 90s saw the rise of the 3D platformer, and while the first one to come out was Alpha Waves back in 1990, it wouldn't be until the release of Crash Bandicoot and Super Mario 64 in 1996 where the genre would hit mainstream success and solidify itself as the next big thing. Or at least the next big thing for the next 10 or so years. These two games essentially set down some general ground rules as to what might work and what might not work when it comes to 3D platformer designs. Which admittedly is a roundabout way of saying people saw the formula, how it worked, and ran home with it, with every 3D platformer, even to this day, still using some of the design philosophies that these two titles put down. A lot of companies settled on using the Crash Bandicoot formula, since by design, it's a lot more simplistic than creating a whole sandbox you'd see in the likes of Mario 64, Spyro the Dragon, and Rare's entire Nintendo 64 catalog. And one group of licensed titles that so happened to borrow a lot from the Crash Bandicoot book were the Disney tie-in games of the time. While not every licensed Disney game took this approach, I mean heck, The Emperor's New Groove is basically Croc 3 in spirit, we got a good few to look at. And hey, since the 90s were filled with people trying to rip Disney off, why don't we take a look at some of the titles that tried ripping off the Crash Bandicoot formula, shall we? Let's go! Let's start with the one that just got a live-action remake, because I need a memory of a much better product. That being Lilo&Stitch Trouble in Paradise. Developed by Blitz Games in 2002, aka the same studio that brought you Pac-Man World 3 and some iCarly games. So Lilo&Stitch is actually interesting because the original movie had two different tie-in titles, each one taking a very different approach in what the games were about and how they were executed. So this one in particular is the Crash Bandicoot clone, while there was another one on the PlayStation 2 that was more of a dynamic action platformer with third-person shooter elements. Needless to say, you could kind of tell which one of these was given the higher budget and priority release-wise. But, you know, on the other hand, we've seen developers work with very little, and they've been able to actually crank out something of surprising quality. So is any of that here with Trouble in Paradise? Well, unfortunately, this isn't one of those gems. Huh. I guess this is an American copy. So you play as either Lilo or Stitch, surprise surprise, as you traverse through 15 levels. One issue I do have with the game is that it feels very random event-wise. I know I said it follows the movie, but you wouldn't know that outside of the footage that just feels randomly thrown in. I guess, hey, if you can't do proper cutscenes, clips from the movie are your uncle. It'd be like if I replaced any commentary that I had with just footage from the movie with no rhyme or reason. Hey, what did I tell myself about copying bad habits? Now, of course, in a game with enemies, you're gonna have to have some method of attacking them, right? Well, Stitch is a no-brainer. He's wild and crazed, who has an anger meter that when full has him roll around the place with invincibility! The problem with the invincibility is that the controls for Stitch are absolutely buggered, making it hard to steer him across the lifeless environments. It's also practically a death sentence nearby any bottomless pit, since he'll just fall into it. Invincibility! It means jack all against gravity. And Lilo, well, considering she has a violent side in the movie, the game takes another approach. Instead of putting up your dukes, it's voodoo! Oh, wait, what? That's right, Lilo is practicing a specific type of magic that in another Disney movie would be labeled as the dark arts. She can destroy enemies, have her specialty be summoning fat, sunburnt tourists to clash on them. I can only imagine how that one deleted scene would have gone in the movie had she used voodoo against the tourists there.
Tourists, prepare to die!
Lilo's movements are about the same as Stitch, but where she falters is admittedly the attack. While both can do a butt bounce that weirdly homes in on a target like a rear view missile, Lilo lacks a proper ranged attack, otherwise unlike Stitch. Stitch can spit out, let's call it phlegm, towards an enemy while Lilo's voodoo doll forces you to go up and close, and unfortunate with the wonky hitbox detection, you're more than likely to take damage first and foremost. So let's actually discuss the boss fights for a second. So I'm going to split them into two different sections, based on characters that are actually from the movie and the original stuff that the game made, since this game actually has 15 bosses. With the characters from the movie, with Cobra, Bubbles, Jumba, and even Guntu, they're essentially chase sequences. You're being rushed about, and they're fine. Myrtle is the exception, though. Her entire boss fight is literally just racing down to the end of the street while she crashes into every single TNT box possible. I mean, she deserves it, but she also deserves this. Now, the chase sequences are well designed from a level geometry point of view, but they do suffer from one big problem, that being the camera is way too close to the characters, making it absolutely hard to see upcoming obstacles when you're being shot at by some enemies like Jumba and Guntu. Rather than providing a reasonable challenge, you're more than likely to fall into pits because of your inability to actually see far. Oh hey, now I know what gaming while being short-sighted feels like. Now, you may recall that I said that this game has 15 bosses. Well, that's actually a lie. This game has 18 bosses. And you want to know who the other 14 are? They're these rock golem buggers, created especially for the video game. They are the epitome of padding out your game in order to progress to any level, you have to fight them in the hub world. And the only thing that changes is that they start by going down in 2 hits to something requiring 4 or more. I try not to say this with regards to game development, since it can be a big task, and people that work in the industry are very hardworking. But I'm sorry, this is flat out laziness. Recycling the same boss is fine if you do it a handful of times, especially if you do something new, but recycling it 14 times with the same moveset and all you're doing is increasing their health? Padding! Absolute padding, bad level design, and entirely lazy. As I mentioned earlier, the levels also just feel so open, and they're just surprisingly empty despite the enemies you take on. And it gets very boring really fast. You sort of start to go on to a bit of an automated cycle of just going through the motions. With that said, the soundtrack's actually an absolute darling, able to create a nice, calm, yet still engaging vibe. Essentially, the soundtrack is pulling all the weight here when it comes to creating anything that remotely gets you invested. While the movie itself might carry a lot of heart, the game fails to convey any of that in the level design. If it isn't for the weird hitboxes that make you take damage, or the level design that feels oddly barren despite being filled with so many enemies, you essentially get a title that somewhat tries to be charming like the original movie, but it's very much a one-and-done situation, and I can't find myself recommending it to anyone, even if you're feeling it nostalgic. Especially since going down, there are better Crash Bandicoot clones that carry the Disney moniker. Okay then, not a good start. Let's see what else we've got here. Ah, here we go. The Lion King, Simba's Mighty Adventure. Released in 2000, this was an interesting title. Looking at the cover, you'd think this is merely a straightforward adaptation of the 1994 movie, which makes sense. It was Disney's highest grossing feature at the time, and the last game was a hit. Now we're in full 3D town, so why not remake it? I mean, they basically remade it for the Game Boy Color version. Well, despite having a cover that screams the first movie, this one is unique in that it's also an adaptation of the 1998 direct-to-video sequel. A rare feat among the Disney video game catalogue, as most are either original titles that follow the original film, or are based directly on a theatrical release. As for the game itself, wow! Just wow! Look, by all accounts, it is not the most broken video game I've ever played. It's also not even one of the most broken video games out there. But just wow, it is an absolute nothing of a game. If I went on about Lilo&Stitch being lazy when it came to the boss fights, this one is nothing but pure laziness through the entire runtime. And it's not even a long game! You can beat this darn thing in about 40 minutes! Right, there's a lot to break down when it comes to this game, so let's try and do it bit by bit. Firstly, it repeats the same sin that the Lilo&Stitch game has, where the hitbox is actually very unclear, and more times than not, you end up actually doing damage to yourself rather than the enemy in question. It doesn't help that the actual attacks in the game are flat out abysmal. First of all, Simba has 3 attacks, all of which are just terrible. First and foremost is the jump attack. Now, normally in a video game, you just jump on an enemy. That's it. The end. No need to complicate it. This one makes it that you need to push the attack button as well so that you can pounce on the enemy. And the problem is that there's a bit of a weird, awkward thing where it's actually kind of hard to land the attack on the enemy. It sort of feels like when you're jumping towards him, you end up overdoing it. So you end up hitting the ground and the enemy just walks around and he hurts you. Next is the roar, which is absolutely pathetic. The range on this thing is so short and so small that it might as well not even be an attack. And the fact that the 16-bit game was able to cover more range than the 3D one that came out nearly 6 years later, there is no excuse for that. It's hard to tell when your roar actually hurts the enemy. You have to essentially get up and close to it. And when you do that, the enemy is more likely to get the first punch at you. And you take the damage for it. And of course, the other attack is rolling. Whee! So Simba can also roll into enemies, but which is the only attack that actually feels somewhat competently made. Now, of course, there's the other issue with this. It's a little loose, so you're more than likely to actually fall off into a cliff quite a number of times. How do you butcher this? You had something to go off of. You had a game that came out 6 years ago that you could have drawn inspiration from. And you know what? The Game Boy Color version did that. Simba has a claw attack in that game that's not abysmal. So I have no idea what happened here. And it's not like the enemies themselves are any better. They just stick in one position going up and down, and that's about it. You could easily just walk around and they won't do anything. Even later in the game when you're going up against rogue lions, they don't care. Oh, hey, there's Simba. He's the one that banished us all. Yeah, but I like this path instead. They didn't bother to have them try and attack you. And there's so much room for you to just go around. The levels are, for the most part, empty. And the way that the game tries to pad it out is that they put in these poor collectibles. And the idea is that you collect 100 of them, you could go to the next level. And the thing is, there are so many of them, you could put in the bare minimum, and you could carry on the game as if nothing had happened. There is no challenge whatsoever. You are just going through 3D geometry, and that's it. There's no challenge, there's nothing that makes the world dynamic, there's nothing that really captures your attention at all. And again, it's absolutely easy. But no, if you collect Simba's full name, guess what? You can unlock voice clips from the movie. Really? I can unlock voice clips from the movie that came out 6 years ago, and the sequel that came out 2 years ago that I could watch on the TV with the original voice actors. Yeah, for some weird reason, this one actually has everyone's lines redubbed for the most part. Another issue that we also have is the fact that, how do I put this nicely? There is so much blatant laziness here. Like, wow. This game, just look at this. This is supposed to be Nala, right? They literally just used Simba's 3D model! They didn't even bother retexturing it at all to create any semblance that this is a different character! Oh, by the way, another thing that makes the paw collecting so easy, when you die, you don't lose any! You don't get penalized for it! And there are so many lives that you can collect. I wound up beating the game without getting a single game over. And this was especially when I reached that moment of being in a no-care mode whatsoever, because I was just done. And the worst thing is, there is so much they could have worked with. And even with the material that they do use. Like, for example, the stampede, the buffalo stampede, one of the most gut-wrenching emotional moments for lots of children who first watched The Lion King. It had a lot of intensity in the 16-bit version. It is supposed to be a very intense moment no matter what the medium is. So, how is the stampede in the game version? Wow! Look, first of all, I should not be able to walk up and down like I'm just going through the parking lot or crossing the street. No, this is ridiculous. And whoa, there was literally a Disney game that came out just the year before that had a whole chase sequence. Now, what happens if I try to dilly-dally and walk around there? Yeah, that seems about right. Also, just to go back to the whole being entirely lazy, so the game only has 10 levels, of which there are only 3 bosses you go up against. The hyenas, who are literally just the same 3D model, copy-pasted 3 times. Congratulations, buddy! You found a way to cut down production. And Scar, and also you have Zera. And yeah, no in between, so they didn't even bother putting Zera's son as a boss fight there for one reason or another. Heck, he's not even. You don't even see him in any other footage whatsoever. Ay, okay. But now, this is the thing that gets me. So, as noted before, this is only 10 levels long. Fairly short game. How would they cram in so many bosses? Well, let's take a quick count of how many bosses were in the 16-bit game, shall we? So we had a hyena on the first level. We then also had the elephant graveyard with the hyenas as well. So far we're 2 boss fights there. Okay. Then we got the baboon. So 3. So we've already. So before Simba's even an adult, the 16-bit game has already hit the same amount of bosses that the game that covers 2 movies has. Okay. So what's after that one then? There's some pumas you fight. I don't know if you could consider that to be a boss fight. And then finally you have Scar. So about 5, 6. So the 60-bit game, that's about the same length as the original and also has 10 levels, has double the amount of enemies that you have to go up against than the 3D one. How? Why? You did... And the annoying thing is that with the Scar battle, they literally just got so lazy that it's just copy-pasted for Zera, just with a few more obstacles. And of course, with the hyenas, they literally just run around to the point that they are essentially the same difficulty as a common enemy. Not to mention that the transition between The Lion King 1 and 2 is very abrupt and out of nowhere. Especially weird since, again, none of the marketing material showcased any of the Lion King 2 segment whatsoever. And I really don't know why they didn't do that. That would have actually been a very good marketing ploy. Let's see, but then there are other issues too that are flat out terrible level design, which is impressive considering how basic the levels are, and also the fact that they are practically empty. And one of them being there is some very terrible level geometry collision. There are times when the game expects you to claw onto the edge of a cliff to collect a collectible, especially noteworthy in the fire level, where Simba has to dangle on a cliff to try and get his name, and because the geometry collision is so buggered up, you're more than likely to fall into the fire before you even get the letter. Not to mention, even beyond that, if you go to the edge of the platform, you're probably going to fall through it. So many times did this end up happening to me, just out of nowhere, where Simba just fell through the platform, or sometimes even through an enemy. And again, how does this happen? How does this happen? You didn't even have a home release that you needed to hit up with. So what the heck went on here? And how do you take such a nothing level design that's painfully easy and just absolutely bugger it entirely? And then we go to the 2D sections where animals run in, but because you can't tell the depth because of how zoomed out the camera is, you're more than likely to actually get damaged instead. Again, how? Now, you'll probably notice that there's one thing I haven't mentioned at all, unlike the Lilo&Stitch one, that being the soundtrack. And that's because the game's soundtrack is basically non-existent, or it just leaves no experience whatsoever. With the 16-bit game, they actually bothered to do 16-bit renditions of the classic songs, which makes sense. The soundtrack to The Lion King is one of Disney's most popular, and was crazy popular at the time as well. So why does this PlayStation game that has better audio quality, why is it missing music from both Lion King movies? And yes, the sequel has good songs, and the fact that they're not in here whatsoever, heck, they're not even in the Game Boy Color version for some bizarre reason. How the heck do you mess that up? Look, there are Disney games that are a lot more fundamentally broken than The Lion King Simba's Mighty Adventure. But of all the Disney titles I've ever come across, and that even includes the educational ones, this is the most soulless of them. At least based on a mainstream Disney release. Because there is absolutely no redeeming quality whatsoever in this game. They did not give a single damn at all. They put more effort into making it that Simba could run into a wall which actually turns out to be a hindrance as you go on, where he will just run into a wall, crash, and then be like, oh, that hurts. The Lion King Simba's Mighty Adventure is definitely one of the worst Disney tie-in games I've ever come across, and it is one that deserves to be forgotten whatsoever. It is the antithesis of a lazy cash grab title, and because of that, I am just shocked that it exists in the first place at all. There has to be at least one decent Disney Crash Bandicoot clone. I know I shouldn't feel this way since it's only 2 duds, but at the same time, it does show that you can't just slap a formula and expect it to work. Let's see, what else have we got here? Oh, this should be interesting. A Donald Duck game in the same style as Crash Bandicoot. Honestly, that really shouldn't be that complicated. I mean, it's Donald Duck. How do you complicate Donald Duck? Wait a minute. Just how many versions of this game are there? Well, okay, I mean, the console ones are all probably the same. No, they're not. Oh boy, there's going to be quite a bit to cover here. So I guess we'll do that next time with a video dedicated to Quack Attack and all its ports, I suppose. Well, all its Crash Bandicoot clone ports. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Hi there, I wanted to say thank you again for tuning in on the next video that I had produced. I greatly appreciate it, and I hope that the channel keeps growing, and I hope to develop more fans as we go along. Now, while the next video might be on Quack Attack, there's a chance I might take a little detour and cover something else. Maybe a little bit animated so I don't burn myself on all the Crash Bandicoot Disney clones out there. If you'd like to support, feel free to donate to my Patreon or Ko-fi below. And also feel free to take a look at my blog if you wish. If you want to, you can also follow me on Twitter or Blue Sky at the links attached below. Have a lovely day further.